are ministers who are deeply opposed to this deal. Former National Security Minister Ismail Ben-Gvir, he even left the government over his opposition to the deal, and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has also threatened to leave if the fighting doesn't continue after the first phase of the ceasefire deal is completed. So there's still a lot of variables in this, and we're just going to have to see what will happen, really.
Okay, our correspondent Emily Gordine with the latest from Jerusalem. Emily, as always, thank you. Now to Africa and the DRC. M23 rebels in the Democratic Republic of Congo say that they've captured the eastern city of Goma after days of heavy fighting with government forces and UN peacekeepers. The M23 militia is backed by neighboring Rwanda, and the United Nations has warned of a major humanitarian crisis. Thousands of civilians have already fled across the border into Rwanda. The Congolese government says Rwandan troops are present in Goma along with the rebels. Goma is the biggest city in eastern Congo, home to around 1.7 million residents and displaced people. Miriam Favier is the head of the International Red Cross's sub-delegation in Goma. I asked her what she is hearing about the situation in the city.
It's been since yesterday morning the situation has drastically deteriorated, intensified, especially in terms of use of weapons that we're currently hearing. Actually from our shelter right now, you see there's been use of gunfire, but also heavy artillery, especially since this morning in the center of the city of Goma, which obviously has impacted the humanitarian situation, but also civilians. We have a few health centers that we support here, and our team, surgical team, is still in the hospital and has received an incredible number of wounded since a few days, and in particular yesterday.
I want to ask you about these images that have emerged. These are apparently the first images of M23 rebels allegedly marching prisoners through the streets of Goma. I mean, can you confirm that that is happening? I mean, what can you tell us about that?
What we can confirm from our shelter right now is that we hear intense fighting. We don't know exactly who is fighting whom. What we can hear is that there is a use of heavy artillery that is impacting the civilian population, that you have active fighting in highly dense areas, populating areas, and this is terrible for the population. One of our staff has been actually impacted because his house has received a bomb this morning. Fortunately, no wounded, but the situation is really concerning.
That was Miriam Favier of the International Red Cross in Goma. Let's take a look now at some of the other stories that are making headlines around the world. The European Union's top diplomat is expecting an agreement to ease sanctions on Syria following the ousting of the Assad regime. Kaja Kallas is meeting EU foreign ministers today in Brussels. The EU has delayed lifting sanctions until it sees changes in Syria. China says it's extremely unlikely the virus behind the pandemic came from a Chinese laboratory leak. The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency has said that COVID-19 likely originated with lab research rather than being transmitted by animals. The first known human infections were detected in Wuhan, China, back in November of 2019. Thousands of students in Serbia have taken part in new anti-government protests. They blocked a major road and are refusing to move. Students have led daily demonstrations in Belgrade since November, following the deaths of 15 people in a railway station roof collapse. They blame government corruption for that disaster. Sweden has detained a Maltese-flagged vessel in the Baltic Sea over a damaged underwater cable. Authorities are investigating suspected sabotage. The fiber optics cable connects Sweden with Latvia. Commemorations are being held at Auschwitz to mark 80 years since the liberation of the Nazi death camp at the end of
early in the morning, and I'm surprised at how busy everything is already. More and more visitors are coming to visit Auschwitz I, the so-called main camp. I hear names in the entrance tunnel. Names of people who died in Auschwitz. So many lost fates. Above the entrance gate, there are three cynical words. Arbeit macht frei. Work sets you free. Auschwitz is located between the Polish cities of Katowice and Krakow. The Nazis built the main camp in 1940 in a former barracks. It initially consisted of 22 blocks. Later, there were 28. Watchtowers, barbed wire, and electric fences made escape almost impossible.
Auschwitz was initially established as a concentration camp, like many others set up by the Nazis across Europe.
It was later expanded into an extermination camp. Because it was centrally located in the middle of German-occupied Europe, it was well connected to the railway network. The main camp had space for 20,000 prisoners, although space is the wrong word. The people were crammed together here. At first, it was mainly political prisoners from Poland. Then transports came from all over Europe. With Soviet prisoners of war, members of the Sinti and Roma, queer people, and later, mostly Jews. The Nazis told them that they would be relocated and that they should only take the most necessary luggage with them. That was taken from the people immediately after they arrived in Auschwitz. Not just gold or valuables, but also glasses, prostheses, clothing, shoes. Nothing was left to them. Even their hair was shaved off. This was used to make fabric for mattresses or uniforms.
Out of respect for the dead, we're not allowed to film in this block. Tons of hair can be seen.
The prisoners had to work in the surrounding factories under the most difficult conditions. Most of them only lasted a few months. They died of exhaustion, hunger, disease, torture, medical experiments, or they were killed on this death row with a shot in the back of the neck. Many of the victims here were Polish resistance fighters. In 1941, a new method of murder was tested at Auschwitz: mass extermination in the gas chamber, using Zyklon B. It was the suitable method for the Nazis to implement the so-called final solution to the Jewish question, which meant the systematic extermination of all Jews in Europe. 6 million people fell victim to this murderous madness. The gas chamber in the main camp is still preserved. It's unimaginable. Here, in this room, thousands of people suffocated in agony. The crematorium is right next to the gas chamber. The bodies were burned here. The ovens were specially developed for this purpose by the German company Topf und Söhne. In 1947, the former camp commander Rudolf Höss was hanged next to the gas chamber after he was put on trial in Nuremberg and Warsaw. The gas chamber in the main camp was shut down in 1942. Instead, the Nazis opened 4 large new gas chambers in the neighboring Birkenau camp. It was a factory of death, built solely to wipe out the Jews of Europe. Auschwitz was liberated by the Soviet army on January 27, 1945. There were about 7,000 survivors, 200 of them children. The living were cared for. The dead were buried. The Auschwitz Memorial is now on the UNESCO World Heritage List, and the 27th of January has been designated the International Day of Remembrance for the victims of the Holocaust. I have an appointment with Andrzej Kaczorzik, the Deputy Director of the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum.
Wir sehen in Europa und in der ganzen Welt, dass rechtsextreme Kräfte, antisemitische Kräfte, nationalistische Kräfte stärker werden. Wie gehen Sie damit um hier?
Die ganze unsere Arbeit hier, die Schicksale von Kindern, Babys, Leuten, die unschuldig gewesen sind, zu zeigen, und das ist meiner Meinung nach unser ganzer Kampf gegen Antisemitismus seit vielen, vielen Jahren. Wir müssen machen weiter, meine ich, dasselbe, um möglicherweise Millionen Leuten nicht nur zeigen und nicht überzeugen, aber die Werkzeuge in die Hände geben. Guck mal, das kann man aus dem Hass entstehen, aus dem Wort, aus dem Tat.
The next day I'm visiting Auschwitz II, the Birkenau extermination camp. Here the Nazis installed a vicious, sophisticated death machine that had only one goal: to kill as many Jews as possible. Birkenau was huge. The labor camp had more than 300 barracks for around 100,000 prisoners. There were also 4 large gas chambers and crematoria. They were in operation day and night. This is the only way to explain the scale of the mass murder committed here. Hundreds of thousands of people were gassed in Birkenau. I am accompanied by Lea Suko. The high school graduate comes from Germany and is working for a year as a volunteer at the International Youth Meeting Center Auschwitz, the IYMC. She shows it to me later. We first go to the place where the SS carried out the so-called selections.
Hier ist eben ein Zug angekommen, Menschen sind ausgestiegen, wurden dann sortiert, Frauen auf die linke Seite, wie man hier sieht, Männer auf die rechte Seite in 2 Reihen, die sich gegenüberstanden.
Wie ging es Ihnen hier weiter?
Von dort ging es dann weiter wirklich zur Selektion. Es wurde entschieden, ob die Menschen ins Arbeitslager hierher kommen oder direkt in die Gaskammern ihren Tod entgegengehen müssen.
Tragedies have taken place here. Families were torn apart, never seeing each other again. This all happened right here at this spot. Women with children, the elderly and the sick were usually taken directly to the gas chambers. Those whose labor the Nazis still wanted to exploit were herded into the barracks. They were completely overcrowded with 400 people in each. Hunger, cold, illness, epidemics, the death rate was incredibly high. As the Soviet army advanced in November 1944, the SS began to cover up traces of their crimes. That's why the gas chambers and crematoria were blown up. Lea also shows me a place that is somewhat hidden on the extensive grounds.
Hier sehen wir jetzt einen Ascheteich. Hier wurde die Asche aus dem Krematorium 4 und 5 entsorgt. Ja, und für mich ist dieser Ort eben ein besonderer. Er wird auch als Friedhof behandelt, also hier haben keine Konservierungsarbeiten oder Ähnliches stattgefunden. Und für mich ist es besonders, weil die Menschen, die hier umgekommen sind, nochmal sehr präsent sind, und für mich ist das eben ein wichtiger Ort des Gedenkens.
often accompanies youth groups to the memorial. Will it ever become easier to visit this place?
Es gibt Tage, an denen ist es emotional schon schwierig. Und das Thema Holocaust begleitet mich jeden Tag. Das steckt man auch nicht so einfach weg. Aber es gibt auch Tage, an denen auch ich eher auf Distanz zu dem gehen kann, was ich hier sehe. Aber trotzdem